Hi there, folks. Welcome to another video review of a really spectacular computer component. I think that the enclosure for any build is probably the most important thing to the whole look of a PC, obviously, but to me it's more than that. I think that a case gives the PC its whole personality. It can make you appreciate a computer that may not be top of the line. It might not be the most powerful thing on the planet, but if it's in the right enclosure, it can make you feel confident about it, make you feel good about it. Especially if you build it on your own, it can make you feel like you've made something really nice. And so I just wanted to share this enclosure with you guys. It's a fairly popular computer case. It's known as the Cooler Master Mastercase H500 ARGB. ARGB meaning it has addressable RGB fans, as you can see here in the very front of the enclosure. Two very large ARGB fans are included with this build, fully addressable. That's what the A stands for with ARGB. There's a lot of really awesome things about this enclosure that I'm going to share with you guys today. We're going to do a full sort of breakdown and overview of this case, just so you guys can see what you're getting for your money. I think that you'll be surprised. I purchased this case here for $119 last week. It goes in and out of stock constantly, but $119 is roughly how much you might expect to pay for it when it is in stock. I see it go up to $130 sometimes. I think that it's a really good deal at $118. So, and I'm going to show you why. So let's go ahead and have a look. Well, here's a look at the back of the case. I like to start here just because this is where you're going to be doing a lot of your work, especially behind the back panel here. There's a lot of really interesting and neat things about what it's going to be like to work in this enclosure, and a lot of that is apparent just right here when you first take a look at this thing. Number one, the first thing that I noticed that was really cool was how they did the power supply dust filter down below. So typically you're going to mount in an enclosure like this, you're going to mount your power supply so that it is sucking air in from underneath the enclosure and kind of shooting it out here. That's pretty standard nowadays. Some people like to flip it around and pull hot air in to the power supply from within the enclosure and shoot it out the back, and they sort of use it as an exhaust. I don't think that's the most healthy thing to do for a power supply. I like to give it fresh air. And so I really appreciate when they include a dust filter. What's neat about this dust filter is that it's totally accessible from the back, and it's not super big, and it's really easy to get out. So you can just take that out and go and wash it, and then boom, you can plug it right back in. Obviously you want to wait till it's dry so you're not shooting any water particles into your power supply. That would be no. But like I said, it's just really convenient due to the accessibility there, and it just clicks in and out very nicely, and it's not cheaply done like some of those that you see out there. I mean, it is made of plastic and all that stuff, but like I said, this is a $118 enclosure, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead and take off the back side panel here that you guys can see. One of the cool things about that process is that, like a lot of these nicer enclosures these days, the screws can be toolless. Okay, so when you first get the thing, they're factory tightened, so you're going to need to use a screwdriver to unscrew this, but then you can just have them kind of hand tightened, and it's captured, but it's not done like some of these other captured screws I've seen out there. It's done really nicely. Like, it's got a really good high quality sort of capture mechanism there. And just, again, it adds the convenience of having to do either maintenance or just the initial build. Other than that, it's pretty standard. It just slides in and out with some sort of regular kind of clips that you would normally get in an enclosure like this. They're nice. They're not easy to break, which is a cool thing. And they just rest in these little, grooves. Might be a word you'd use. So that's pretty regular. I'm going to go ahead and go through now the cabling that you guys are seeing kind of draped in here. Now, when you first open this thing up, all of these cables are actually going to be stuffed up underneath here with bags and things wrapped around them. The first thing I like to do with an enclosure is really take the cabling out of the enclosure and really organize it and take a look at what it has, because you'd be surprised at how much the cabling can help you plan out the whole build. You know, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I'll illustrate that to you, but let's go ahead and take a look at what we have here. Okay, so first off, I already have these kind of re-tangled up a little bit, but we'll just bear with it together. First off, it has your sort of standard, well, standard nowadays, your standard front panel USB 3.0 connector that you guys can see here. Very normal, very regular, nothing too out of the ordinary here. It's not low quality, not high quality, it's just pretty normal looking USB 3.0 connector there. Plenty of length. Like, you're gonna be able to plug that in wherever you need to plug it in at, and manage that cable very nicely. Of course, you have your sort of standard HD audio that's been around for a long time, with your ketchup and mustard cabling there, and usually that's going to be plugged into the bottom of your motherboard. And looks like it's got a nice little outlet here, or a porthole, I guess I should say, here, for you to be able to do that very nicely. Sometimes I feel like a lot of enclosures overdo the amount of ports that portholes that they put down here. You really don't need more than just like one, you know, but that's, I guess that's a preference thing. Now, of course, you have your basic front panel connectors. Now, one thing that this case does not have that I appreciate some enclosures coming with, like an NZXT 5 series enclosure, they come with these really cool plugins where you can just stick all these into it, and then you plug the whole thing into the motherboard. So just like with any classic case, you're going to have to plug these in individually, and so that's kind of a bummer there. But no big deal. That's pretty normal still in the industry. I wish this was a little more universal, so we wouldn't have to deal with all these little tiny plugins. All right, so moving forward here, we've got your USB 2.0 connector here that also goes to the front panel, which we'll look at in a little bit. As far as other cabling goes, this is where things get really interesting. Let me kind of just untangle some of this stuff with my one good hand here. So this feller here is a 3-pin connector that you can connect to the motherboard or to a fan hub of your choosing. Actually, that is the daisy chain connector. This is your motherboard connector here. And this connector here connects to both fans. So this guy is going to power both fans in the front of the case from one fan socket on your motherboard. That's very convenient. It's nice that they include that. A lot of cheaper cases will give you multiple fans, but they won't give you the cabling that you might need in order to more conveniently connect them to your motherboard. So they at the guys over at guys and gals over at Cooler Master, they know what's going on. They included this nice sort of dual pin or dual cable connector, so you can run both fans off of one fan header on the motherboard. And so that's how you power your fans. Now for the RGB. This is probably the coolest thing that that I could say about this case. Okay, so one of the hardest things about dealing with RGB and ARGB is the fact that there's not a lot of standardization going on in the industry for that right now. There's a lot of different kinds of plugins and things like that. And I just got to say, I'm really impressed with how Cooler Master is handling that situation, at least with this enclosure. This isn't going to allow you to necessarily plug into every single RGB option out there in the world. That is to say, a way to control it with your motherboard, but this comes pretty close to having most everything that you could possibly need, regardless of what branding you're using. As long as you're using a motherboard that has ARGB options, this is likely going to be able to plug into it. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So this here is probably the more familiar connector that you're going to see with an ARGB outlet on a motherboard. And as you can see, this is very nicely labeled ASRock, ASUS, and MSI. And so that indicates, hey, this is going to be the one you want to use if you have one of those brands of motherboards. And then it has another connector sort of split off from the little hub here labeled Gigabyte. So Gigabyte has its own proprietary connector, and there it is. So you can use this on Gigabyte, ASRock, MSI, and ASUS without problems. If you have one of those motherboards and it has an ARGB connector on the motherboard, you'll be able to use this case and control the ARGB functions of the fan with your motherboard's software, which is really, really nice, man. Like I said, I thought that was really cool. And the other neat thing is that you can daisy chain off of this. It's got an extra connector so you can connect other components to it, other fans or whatever you might have. And so I found that to be extremely well thought out and convenient. Now, that's not it, though. I'm not quite done talking about the ARGB functions, because there's some of you out there that might be running an old school motherboard, a motherboard that you just love, a motherboard that you feel particularly attached to. And if that is the case and you wanted to be able to use the ARGB functions of these fans, Cooler Master's got you covered, man. It comes with this little doohickey right here, a really cool little component. Let me get it out of the bag really quick. Okay, here is the fan, the ARGB connector for the fan itself, okay? And what's cool about this, like a lot of those cheaper cases out there, it just connects via SATA power. And then right here, you've got a button that I presume you'll be able to use to just cycle through different lighting options that the fans have. And so you'll be able to get a lot of ARGB goodness out of those fans, even if you don't have a motherboard that supports it. I think that is so, so awesome. I mean, really, really, really cool. Good job, Cooler Master, for including this. Okay, so a couple of other things that this comes with. Obviously, it's going to come with your screws and cable management ties and things like that that you might need. Just basic zip ties and some other ties, but nothing really fancy, but still very, very appreciated. As far as cable management goes, you're going to have a lot of hooks and options and things in order to keep your cables tidy so that it doesn't run low on any options or anything like that. And another thing that's really cool is that with a lot of nice cases out there, you get these rubber grommets, and so those are included as well. I really, really love those. I think this might be the first case that I've had that actually includes them. And so I'm going to be happy to be able to take advantage of that, because I think it's just a really nice way to clean up cables. And I just, it just looks nicer. Another really cool thing about this case, you guys can see that this is obviously a place where you'll be able to mount some 2.5-inch hard drives, either SSD or just standard spinning disk drives. If it's 2.5-inch, you'll be able to mount them here. And the way that they've done this is sort of a toolless option, where you've got these pegs that are inside of this little baggie here that you screw in to the back. You just hand screw into the back of your 2.5-inch SSD or hard drive, and then you can just kind of mush those pegs into these little rubber holes, making it a very convenient way to sort of swap out drives if you ever need to. I just think that's really, really neat. I'm really, really impressed with just how clever that is as a solution. There's clever solutions out there with a lot of different cases, but I don't know. I just appreciate this particular style of doing that. I think it's going to be really, really nice. And what's cool about it is because these have these little rubber mount holes on it. It's very likely to kind of cut down on vibration issues if you have a mechanical drive like a Fire CUDA or something like that you're plugging in back here for extra storage, like I actually have on my other computer behind me over here. This is going to cut down on vibration noise, and vibration is just not good for a hard drive regardless of the noise. So I think that's a really, really tight solution. The other thing that this comes with, so just so you guys might be curious, I'll let you guys see this. This is a nice little microfiber cloth that comes with the enclosure itself. I think it's just like a little party favor that they throw in there, just because they're cool over there at Cooler Master. All right, so I'm going to flip this around, and we're going to look at the inside of the enclosure where you're going to put your components. So here's a really neat thing about the way in which the glass panel is connected to, or let's say secured to the enclosure. You are going to need to use a standard screwdriver of some kind, or a butter knife or something, to unscrew these. They're not really meant to be hand tightened or hand loosened, but what's really neat about them is that they're captive inside of this glass panel. It's easy enough to lose your panel screws. And so they have made a solution, a nice rubber solution, to keep these screws captive on here. And I thought, again, that's just a very clever way for them to handle that issue that a lot of builders come across. Like, it's nice to be able to not have to keep track of one more screw. It's one less thing to lose, and so it just stays in there very nicely, and it just feels very high quality. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. I'm going to go ahead and get this panel off of here. What's cool about getting it off is that it does sort of hinge on here, at least via gravity, but if you take it down too low, it will pop out. So at this point, you can just kind of lift it out of there like so. Okay, so this is the main, area where you're going to build your computer. At least this is where the components are going to be built into. And so this is really what you're going to be viewing after you have all of your beautiful components inside of this machine. And I just wanted to kind of point out a couple of really neat things about this enclosure from this angle. So first of all, you guys are probably curious about these fans. So let's go in here and get a little closer. You can see what kind of fans these are, because it just comes with these two. And if you wanted, you can order another one of those fans and put it in the top, and you'll be able to plug right into that fan head or fan controller that I showed you guys a minute ago, and you'll be able to control the ARGB on that as well. And so if you wanted to order an extra fan from Cooler Master, these are the H500 ARGB, and it says there, it's a little hard to read, but they just, they have some standard specifications there. 12 volt, 0.42 amps. And so, yeah, these are very, very, very nice fans. I was actually surprised by the quality. I just kind of like to check out the fan quality whenever I get a new enclosure, just to see how they feel, I guess. And typically when you get a bigger sized fan, and I'll go ahead and put the actual measurements of the fan right down here for you guys to see, because I can't remember off the top of my head. But they're the larger sort, and they typically aren't very high quality when you get them in an enclosure like this. They're just sort of more for looks than anything else. And I gotta tell you guys, this is a very nice heavy fan. Like, this thing is not cheaply made. It's not flimsy or flexible. These are legitimate fan fins that I'm feeling there, and so I just wanted you guys to know that, like, it's one thing to see it in video, but you guys can't really feel the quality, obviously, from where you're sitting. And I just want to vouch for the quality of these fans. Like, these are actually very nice to the touch. The other fan that this comes with is just your standard 120 millimeter fan that you'll find in a lot of Cooler Master cases. In the back here, again, very high quality. Nothing too special about it, just a very normal sort of fan. As far as the connector goes, it is a 3-pin connector. So you're not gonna, on a lot of motherboards, you're not gonna get a whole lot of speed control with a 3-pin connector like this. I think there are some motherboards out there that are able to do that, but if you have like a 300, like a B350 or something like that, this is going to run at 1 speed when you plug it in. So just be aware of that. It's going to run at full speed, and it might be a little loud. So hopefully you have a motherboard that can control that if they even exist. So just be aware, it's not a 4-pin. As far as the inside of the enclosure goes, there's a couple of really neat features here that I want to show you. First of all, it has this nice little shroud that covers up any cabling that the grommets aren't covering, just so you can just get a little bit of privacy back there to manage some cables, or maybe stash a an LED light strip or something like that. That's a nice, convenient place to put it. But it's just a really, it's kind of an extra that I think is just very classy, very stylish. It is made of metal, and so it is very high quality, and I believe you can take it in and out of here if you want to. Down below, you're going to find a place to stash actually 3 different items that you might have. First of all, you guys can see at the top here all these little portholes and screw holes and things. That is going to be a place where you can stash a water pump. If you have a water pump and a reservoir, that is going to be a place where it's likely going to be able to screw in. So that's a really nice feature that this has as well. If you guys are going to do some custom cooling on this, there is a little bit of that sort of thing supported here. So that'd be a nice place to put that. Down below, you have again some toolless drive trays that function very, very cleverly. Again, you just kind of unclick it right there, you pull this out, and it yanks out like this, kind of like a drawer, and you can mount both 2.5 and 3.5 inch hard drives on these things, and putting them back is easy enough as well. You just kind of stick it in there, sort of the way that it came out, put it all the way down in there. You got to make sure that you sort of hinge this part onto that, and then it just very nicely clicks in there. Just a convenient place for you to stash your hard drives, and maybe still have them on display. For those of us that like to be able to see as many components as possible, but as few wires as possible, that's a really cool solution for the hard drives, in my opinion. Okay, the last really interesting thing about this enclosure that I want to show you guys is this shroud that's down here. Sorry, I got a fingerprint on there. This little feller here is not made of metal. It's actually made of plastic, but it's a very high quality feeling plastic. It's got this little screw, hand tightened screw that, again, you'll have to unscrew this with a screwdriver because it's factory tightened. But once you do that, you can just hand tighten it from that point on. It is not captive, so you can lose this thing. Just be aware of that, but I think there are extras in our little baggie there. Once you unscrew it, it pops out very conveniently. You just slide it back like so, and then it just sort of lifts out of there after being hinged right here and here. Okay, and that's how you're going to access your power supply area. That's how you're going to take your power supply in and out of this enclosure, is by doing that. And what's really, really cool, another sort of little attention to detail that Cooler Master provided, is that it has these nice little soft rubberized, I don't know, little pads that you rest your power supply on. Of course, like all power supplies, it'll screw in back here, but this is just a nice little add-on that they gives it just a little more breathing room, just a little more, literally a little more breathing room for air to flow into this power supply area a little bit easier, and it reduces, again, vibration. Now, I know that like Be Quiet, it has sort of the market on making the very quiet sort of components and things like that, but Cooler Master seems to know what they're doing in that regard. I'm suspecting that this is going to be a very quiet enclosure, just based on some of the stuff that I've seen so far. So yeah, anyway, that is the inside of the enclosure. Those are some of the neat features that I've noticed there. As far as things fitting in this, some of you guys are out there probably wondering, okay, what kind of fans and what kind of radiators can I fit into this enclosure? And so what's nice about this is it comes with this beautiful directions here, and it gives you all of the information on the different options that you have for the enclosure. And I believe it's actually mostly on this side It just gives you some really important information. So for the front of the case, it lists out that it can take 120, 140, 200, 240, 280, and 360 millimeter radiators. So very versatile. You can put a big fat radiator inside of this thing very easily. And what's neat about that situation is that if it's a thick radiator and you want to be able to have fans on like a push-pull configuration, this hard drive bay can just come out. So you have that option there. You have that flexibility. So plenty of room for the largest radiators that you might want to put in there. As far as the top goes, it says here you can put in 120, 140, 240 millimeter radiator in the top of this bad boy. And of course at the top you do have one of those nice magnetized dust filters there as well. I don't think these are really functional in any particular way, because usually folks, you're going to want the top of this thing to be exhausted. You want air shooting out because hot air rises. I don't know if you guys know anything about physics out there, but hot air goes this away. And so trying to blast cool air downward while hot air is sort of trying to escape through the top is not necessarily the most efficient way to cool your enclosure, but anyways, it still looks nice, and I appreciate having that there. Okay, of course it does say you can put in your 200 millimeter fan at the top as well. It shows you how to do that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the front of this thing. Here is your front panel I/O. So you've got your connector area for your headphones and your microphone there. You've got your power button there. It's going to have a nice LED light up. It's got your little reset switch. You have two 3.0 USB connectors and two 2.0 USB connectors there. And of course, you have the mesh front coming as standard. But for those of you out there that want to turn your enclosure into a heater, they do include this little guy over here. Get all this stuff off here and not lose our screw. They do include an acrylic panel front if you so desire to use one. I think this is a waste of space inside of the box that it was delivered in. I would never, ever, ever, ever use this. This is a nice way to just make your computer extremely hot, and it won't look good anyway. So I highly suggest you just, I don't know, throw this away or recycle it, do something with it. I would not use this. Anyways, I'm going to toss that over there. That is the Cooler Master Mastercase H500 ARGB. I am really looking forward to building a PC inside of this bad boy, and I'll be able to tell you guys someday how that goes. It might be a little while until my next build, but it's going to go in this guy. The last thing I would say before signing off is that I was actually really surprised at the overall size of this enclosure. Yeah, in fact, as far as size goes, here it is sitting next to a Corsair 275R case. So you guys can see it's quite a little bit larger than that, both in height and length and width. So this is no tiny enclosure. It's nice and big. When you're looking at pictures, photos, and whatever on the internet, videos I should say, it might not look as big as it is. It is a very nice, large enclosure. You're going to be able to put basically anything you want in here within reason. And then, of course, you have those two giant fans feeding this machine all kinds of good, fresh air. And so, yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful to those of you who are out there considering buying this case. I would say that it is definitely a good purchase. Everything here feels high quality. Even the plastic shroud is very nice plastic. So there's not a whole lot here that I could say that Cooler Master cheaped out on. So this is a pretty safe bet for getting a really nice looking enclosure that's going to be a pleasure to build in. Thanks for watching.